It's great to be here. It was a long ride over, but well worth it. It's been such a wonderful conference. So you just were able to hear from John about a lot of the autonomous technology that you're going to be building right here in your own backyard, and that's coming down the line. I have the great opportunity to talk to you about autonomous vehicle technology that's already on the road today, as well as the challenges around keeping everyone safe and fixing those vehicles and just all the infrastructure that goes around supporting that type of tech out there. So just for example, like I said, autonomous tech is actually already here. A lot of people think about the Tesla right away when they think about an autonomous vehicle. Well, there's a heck of a lot of code on these vehicles. They really are computers on wheels. So when we think about a Tesla, I want you to think about how many millions of lines of code are actually on that vehicle. The correct answer is actually 200 million lines of code that are making these vehicles drive around, and I think that's really amazing. But what's even more amazing is when you start looking at even, quote, more normal vehicles that all of us are driving around. So your average luxury vehicle is sitting at about 100 million lines of code, and your entry-level electric vehicle is at about 10 million lines of code. That's more code that was on the Dreamliner that I drove over, or flew over on from the States to get here. So it's really, really amazing. So the question is, what is all of this code doing in these vehicles? Well, for example, I thought we'd take a really status quo vehicle. In the States, this is your soccer mom minivan, the Chrysler Pacifica. The top picture is a picture of that vehicle. If you look at the one right below, all of those little red dots are little mini computer systems that are doing everything on that vehicle, from the standard stuff of regulating temperature to even if your hands are full, you can swipe your foot underneath the back of the vehicle and the door will open up so you can load your groceries in. It keeps your kids from getting their fingers pinched. But one of the most amazing things that's becoming really common on vehicles now is this car will actually completely stop itself without your assistance if it feels like you're going to be in a car accident in front of you or behind you. So this tech is becoming so standard that 20 major auto manufacturers have agreed in the next 4 years that they're going to have this on all of the light model vehicles, which is essentially everything that you and I drive on the road. And we're actually already ahead of that, because in 2017, 4 manufacturers had already put this in over half their vehicles. This is really exciting stuff that's literally saving lives. What's interesting, though, is, do all of you trust this? So when you think about it, I'd ask the question in the room of how many of you, if we were to ask you, would feel like you're in the top 50% of safest drivers on the road? Can I get a hands for that? All right, well, you guys are much more humble, because if I was in the States, everyone's hands would have gone up. It's really interesting because we really apply this mentality when we look at the tech in these vehicles. So if you ask people about this, over half of them will say, well, we just don't feel safe in autonomous vehicles today. About 45% say, I want to be in control of my car. Again, thinking, I got this all under control. And one of the most interesting ones with the slide that's going to follow this is 43% of the people don't want the vehicle itself to make a mistake. So if we actually look at the facts and not just what we think and feel, which is what we tend to do a lot of the times, when we look at if you should trust this, at the same time, OEs and these vehicle manufacturers are really focused on putting tech on vehicles to save our lives and make our lives more comfortable and make these cars much more fuel efficient. We ourselves are bringing tech in the cars, usually in our hands, that are really distracting us and making us much less safer than we actually think we are, and probably really would be if that wasn't in there. So for example, if we look back to 2014, the World Health Organization said that already 1.25 million people were dying in vehicle accidents every year. And they actually predicted on a global scale that these fatalities due to automobile accidents would become the 5th leading cause. Well, what's interesting is it's 2018, and in the States, it's the 4th leading cause now. So unfortunately, we're way ahead of schedule. So we really, really need to be rethinking, I think, some of the way that we, quote, are trusting this technology that's being put out there. So if we look at it in that way and actually look at the data, just taking that example that I talked about with the tech that's in there that will actually completely stop these vehicles when it's turned on and someone hasn't turned it off, when an accident's impending. What they've done is basically set your test group aside where same vehicles that are on the road don't have that technology and do. In over half the cases where they've had that technology, it has worked, and those vehicles aren't in collisions. So we know this stuff works and works incredibly well. The interesting thing and where the plot twist is here is you've heard a lot about autonomy. It's sexy. We see this stuff out there all the time. What people aren't really paying attention to is all of these other services around there that are really tasked with taking care of this tech and keeping it safe. And the space I really wanted to focus in on today was the collision industry, because the fact of the matter is, like I just showed you, it takes 11 years for the average vehicle to age out on the road. So we've got mixes of these techs out there, and we're going to have it for a long time, where these cars are going into collision repair facilities every day to be repaired. And this is the average person in this space that's fixing these vehicles is now 41 years old. These guys are literally men. There's 2% women in this industry, so I think I have the tech industry actually beat for once for odds. So these guys are aging out. New minds are not coming in because they look at this as being, the old industry of basically fixing metal and not realizing this is really a tech industry now. What's scary is self-reported. So if you ask these 41-year-old guys, how many times are you actually looking at the instructions when you're fixing these cars? And I know there's going to be a lot of women that giggle at that because we are married to these men. 49% of the time, self-reported again, they actually do look at the instructions, which means over half the time they're just going off of memory because they've done this for so long and assuming because they saw that bumper 6 months ago, a year ago, it's the exact same thing, and they go ahead and fix it that way. So just to show you why that's not okay, in the 60s, for example, it took about 5,000 pages worth of knowledge to be able to fix everything on the road. Today it's estimated that that's about 500,000. So there's no way that doing this subjectively is actually putting all of those sensors back into space so that they'll save lives like they're supposed to. So we know, and I know, I've seen this done in shops as well as a lot of the people that I work with, that there's a heck of a lot, too many vehicles out there on the road that when anyone goes to pick them up, they look at them, they look great, they don't realize that the sensors in those vehicles have not been calibrated and not been fixed correctly, which puts all of us and our families in danger. So just an example, what does that look like in the real world? Well, let's take the example of someone doing exactly that. Over half of collisions are usually front and rear. Pretty obvious. So cars now, everyone has an app. When you get a car, you can go online and the car will actually self-report and say, okay, I've been hurt, I need to go into a shop and be fixed. So you take that into a shop. What they may not realize is there's all sorts of hidden technology in there. So if someone's trying to save money and decides, you know what, we're just going to paint that over, you don't need to change it out, or they change it out the way they did 6 months ago, they may not realize that tech like this, like on the V40, has a tiny little sensor in there that they would never know is there that's actually meant to be so good that it can tell when a pedestrian is hit and is actually going to pop that hood up 4 inches and send an airbag out that's very potentially going to save that person's life. That's just one very small example, and you heard earlier on in the day today the airbag reference of airbags are so smart. They can tell if there's a 50-pound child in there, if there's a 110-pound woman in there, if there's a 300-pound guy in there, and they're going to adjust because that stuff makes a huge difference. So the importance of doing this correctly is obviously there. How do I know that this is being done incorrectly? Well, one of the best advisors to me in the States, Mike Anderson, works for a company called Collision Advice. So this is an email that one of his friends got when their Lexus went in to be fixed, and basically all it is a whole bunch of error alerts because the shop didn't actually turn the alerts off when the car was fixed. So using that mentality of if they don't even know to do this, just imagine what else they're forgetting to do when they're fixing those vehicles. So how does this all translate into an opportunity? I know of so many entrepreneurs that are looking for a space where they can really apply their knowledge and their skill set. If you're looking for something that economically is strong, the size of this collision industry just in the States is a $200 billion space. It's a great space to be a part of today. But also, even more importantly, to socially make a difference. Globally, auto-related deaths per year are 1.3 million people that are dying here. And a lot of this stuff is secondary, third collisions as well. It's the second leading cause of death for 5 to 14-year-olds. And the cost of this, of automotive crashes rather, globally is $518 billion. So this is a really great space for all of you to look at. I put my information up here as well because I love to talk shop and I'd love to speak with any of you with more questions, but I really appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.